Have you ever just stopped and wondered why American politics is, well, so American? It's not just about the laws on the books or the politicians on TV. Nope. There's this unwritten code, this shared set of beliefs that really shapes everything. And today we're going to decode that system, American political culture.
So what exactly are these unwritten rules? You can think of it like the operating system for the entire country. It's running in the background all the time. It's not in the Constitution, not exactly. It's more like a political DNA that kind of dictates how we see our government and our own place in society. So let's dig in and see what that DNA is actually made of.
Right. And that DNA, that's what we call political culture. It's this invisible framework that guides how we think and act politically. And here in the US, that whole framework really rests on 5 core values. Let's break them down one by one.
All right, first up, the absolute cornerstone of which you might call the American creed, the power of the individual. Seriously, this idea is so central. If you want to understand the nation's entire political landscape, you've got to start right here.
And at the very heart of that is individualism. It's this deep-seated belief that you are responsible for yourself, that you are the master of your own destiny. I mean, this idea has been the engine for so much of American history, right? From the pioneers heading west to the tech founders starting out in a garage. It's all about self-reliance. And this is not some newfangled idea. Way back in the 1830s, this French guy, Alexis de Tocqueville, came over to study America, and he was just blown away by this uniquely American trait. He saw a country where people weren't looking to a king or some rigid class system to decide their fate. They were looking in the mirror. Their destiny, they believed, was in their own hands.
Okay, but here's where things get really interesting, a modern twist on this whole idea. While individualism is still a core value, something else is shifting pretty dramatically. Just look at this chart from Pew Research. It shows a steep decline in what we call social trust. 40% of boomers say most people can be trusted. Makes sense. But for Gen X, it drops to 31%, and for millennials, whoa, it plummets to just 19%. So what does that tell us? It suggests that as we've leaned harder into individualism, our trust in each other has kind of worn away, maybe leaving us a little more isolated.
So if the individual is king, what do they need to actually succeed? Well, that brings us right to our next 2 values, and they are totally intertwined. Having a fair chance and a free market to compete in.
In this slide, this is a really crucial distinction to get. In the American mindset, the big emphasis is on equality of opportunity. The idea that everyone should get the same chance to succeed, that we all start at the same starting line. What it's not about is equality of result, which would mean making sure everyone finishes the race at the same time. The American ideal is really about celebrating the race itself and rewarding the people who run it the best.
And where does this race happen? Well, that's the free enterprise system. This is the economic side of individualism. The whole idea is that the government should intrude as little as possible. Just let people and businesses make their own choices, take their own risks, and, hopefully reap their own rewards.
And you can see the real-world impact of that belief right here on this chart. When you compare government safety nets across high-income countries, the U.S. really stands out. Our welfare benefits are just smaller. And it's important to understand this isn't necessarily seen as a mistake or a failure of the system. It's a deliberate policy choice, one that's deeply rooted in that cultural belief in free enterprise over a big government safety net.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the power of the individual. But what about the power of the government? The next 2 core values are all about keeping that power in check. It's about making sure the government serves the people and not the other way around.
James Madison absolutely nailed the core problem back in Federalist No. 51. He said, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. But of course, they're not. So he says you have to first give the government enough power to control the people, but then, and this is the key part, you have to oblige it to control itself. You have to build a system with limits.
And the first big limit on that government power is the rule of law. This is just a bedrock principle. It means nobody, and I mean nobody, is above the law. It doesn't matter if you're an average Joe or the President of the United States. The law is the boss. Period. No exceptions.
And this isn't just some nice idea we talk about. It's a real system built on some pretty solid pillars. You've got checks and balances, so no one branch of government gets too powerful. You have an independent judiciary to make sure justice is impartial. You have transparency laws like the Freedom of Information Act to keep an eye on what the government is doing. And, just as important, you need the public to actually respect the law.
Which brings us to our 5th and final core value, limited government. This idea comes straight from philosophers like John Locke. It's the belief that we are all born with certain natural rights. You know the ones: life, liberty. The government didn't give us these rights, so it can't take them away. Its power is restricted, and it only exists because we, the governed, allow it to.
Okay, so here's where it gets really messy. These 5 values, they don't always play nicely together. In fact, most of our biggest, loudest political fights happen when these core beliefs smash right into each other. It's this constant, great American balancing act.
So let's look at a classic real-world example, something we're still arguing about today: welfare. How do you balance the value of helping people who are genuinely in need with that deep-seated American value of individualism and self-reliance? I mean, that is a fundamental tension, and it has shaped our country's policies for a very, very long time.
For a huge chunk of the 20th century, the main answer was a program called AFDC, Aid to Families with Dependent Children. It was created way back in the Great Depression, and its main purpose was simple: provide a safety net. Make sure families could take care of their kids if a parent died, was disabled, or just couldn't find work. The focus was really on providing that support.
But by the 1990s, the mood started to change. A different value, individualism, started flexing its muscles again. The whole story began to shift. You started hearing critics say the old system was creating a culture of dependency. And all that led to this massive welfare reform in 1996. The new law put time limits on benefits and added work requirements. The pendulum swung hard, from focusing on a safety net to emphasizing personal responsibility.
So what does all this show us? It shows that these values are in a constant tug-of-war. The 1996 reform wasn't about completely getting rid of the safety net. It was a recalibration. It was an attempt to strike a new balance between our desire to help others and our belief in self-reliance. And that, right there, is the essence of so many American political debates. A never-ending negotiation between our own core values.
And that brings us right up to today. In an era where we're talking a lot about inequality and political division, this balancing act feels more important than ever. The fundamental question is still on the table: how do we apply these core values to the challenges of the 21st century? Do we lean even more into individualism, or is it maybe time to rediscover the value of community? The answer to that is going to define the future of American political culture for generations to come.